Good afternoon, everyone. If Bill Rojak is still present, I just want to say you have an open invitation to come to my house anytime and bring that kind of passion of haptic science to my 3 daughters, because it is a battle every single day of the week. My house is filled with books. So Jim Sorensen from LSC Communications. I have a responsibility for our religious, trade, and juvenile markets. For those of you who don't know LSC, we operate 7 digital and offset manufacturing facilities throughout the United States, as well as 9 fulfillment warehousing throughout the United States and 1 in Canada as well. So I just want to say thanks to Matt and Jackie for putting on a great event this week. I heard yesterday that you guys met your goal or exceeded your goal by close to 50%, which is fantastic. And it's really great that we're able to bring the manufacturers together along with the publishing community so we can share best practices, share our learnings throughout this industry that is, I don't know about you guys, but it's transforming before my eyes every single day of the week, and something tells me that it's going to keep going. So appreciate everybody's attention, attendance, sponsorship, and look forward to expanding on this in the future.
Hi, thanks, Matt. Hope you enjoyed lunch. The Pixel team spent all evening making all those little sandwiches last night.
Nice.
So we make book paper, we make good sandwiches. But thanks for having us. We're happy to support the book publishing industry. We've been making paper for over 100 years, and you might say, well, I'm not familiar with the Pixel name, but you may be familiar with the name Gladfelter. And so we had a change in ownership, some of the changes that was discussed this morning in the industry. We felt that, but we are alive and well and making a lot of book paper. To use a poker analogy, we are pushing all in on your industry, making great book paper, expanding our inkjet and digital papers. A lot of exciting discussion this morning. We appreciate being here. My team is here: Ken Muller, Rochelle Ward, Kathy Cardilano. Please hand up. So we believe strength in numbers, and Pixel will be here for as long as you folks are making books, and I wake up every morning rooting for you, whether you know it or not, so thanks.
Thank you, guys. Appreciate it. So now we're going to shift gears and talk about cover materials and finishing. And to kick us off, Joe Dunham from LBS.
Thanks, Matt. Today, we have a fantastic panel of some of the smartest and passionate people in our industry that I know, and I'm really fortunate to call them all 3 friends. And we've had a lot of time to spend together, and keeping this group to 45 minutes, Matt's already warned me I'd get the hook out, so trying to keep us to 45 minutes could be a little bit of a challenge. But we just kind of want to tie in the finishing and the cover material selections to what we've heard today. The Amazonification, we're hearing that word, the on just in time. And on the cover material side, for sure, it's a challenge to try to get 2 pieces of cloth or a special material through POD, but people are doing it. So I just kind of want to kick off and talk a little bit about the cover material side. And we have Irene Richards from Neenah, Andy Fetherman from Muller, and Kent Larson from Bridgeport National. So I'm going to turn it over to Irene and have her talk a little bit about cover materials.
Okay. All right. Thank you all for having me here. My name is Irene Richard, and I'm with Neenah. You may be familiar with us. We're a cover material manufacturer. A lot of you may not be as familiar with the Neenah name, kind of like with Pixel. We acquired the Fibermark business, so you may be familiar with Fibermark or Skyvertex or Kyvar or things like that. So we do specialize in cover materials for books. And so, all right, so what we've got up here is we've got kind of a graphic that shows an overview of a variety of different types of materials. I'm sure most of you are all familiar with board books, and this is typically, for children's board books. And again, that's where you're talking about a printed cover design, and it's a little bit, it's a rigid board. It's designed specifically for the safety of children, so that they can go ahead and gnaw on those corners. I'm sure. I apologize in advance, my jokes aren't funny.
That was funny.
My one. So really, that's kind of when you start like thinking about like books and where you're going to manufacture and what you're going to manufacture. Just wanted to make sure that we kind of include that one in there because it's definitely a consideration, especially with the bump that we've seen recently in children's books and more of those being printed. The other one that I'm sure a lot of you are all familiar is C1S, right? Coated one-side paper. And that's going to be for both your soft cover or your case-bound book. And those are the ones that are the printed covers, kind of like the international paper book that we just got, where it's a printed cover and then it's film laminated, and that film lamination kind of adds some stability and protection to that printed material. And then a lot of times what you'll see is case-bound craft paper type books where you're looking at things that are your New York Times bestsellers that are coming out in hardback. Those are the ones that they're the paper that tends to look a lot like cloth. Typically it's a dyed through sheet, so the color is actually in the paper versus being printed on it or coated on top of it. And a lot of these can be printed to a certain amount. And there are a few options that are actually like coated by the manufacturer to add a little bit more durability to the cover. So then there's also polyurethane, which is a coated polymer type book cover. You'll see that a lot in journals. It's a lot in the religious market space, especially for devotionals. Those are those really soft feeling covers. And again, I'm sure a lot of you have experience with this and you know exactly what I'm talking about, but just wanted to make sure we level set it for everyone. And so they have kind of that soft leather look to them. So then moving up a little bit more to my sweet spot, my favorite. Not that I'm biased or anything. Again, not funny jokes. I'm sorry. Latex saturated and coated paper. So this is like Skyvertex. And so these would be case-bound or soft cover books. And then they have many finishes. It was like the original vegan leather, right?
Nice.
Okay. So, and then there's many options there, whether it's something that looks like cloth, like some of you saw last night at the table that we had, or things that are metallic or soft touch, and there are some printable options there as well. And then we have Cromwell leather here, and so that you got to see some of their products yesterday as well, where those are also for like case-bound books, and they have a variety of finishes, but again, it's that animal hide look that's more traditional in the book space. And then cloth books, which I know we're definitely having a moment this past year. And so again, that's a case-bound turned edge book. They're very strong. There are some printable options. And so again, as you kind of look across the spectrum and materials, so usually if you look more towards the left, it's a little bit more economical, a little bit more readily available. Again, there's some more flexibility as far as the print cover goes. And then if you look more towards the right, you're looking at more durable types of cover materials. So that increased costs a little bit.
Thanks, Irene. So, and what we're also seeing with the technology improving is the printing on some of these materials. I mean, with some of these new inkjet, UVs, when you would never print on a latex cover and expect it to hold, or 4-color. We have one product that they took the tactile white cloth, and you'd never know it's a white cloth because they're flood coating it completely black and putting some red accents to it. So the decoration of a lot of these materials is evolving also with the ability with the Scodex, with the UV printers, with the different technology on how to print on some of these substrates that before you would just always stamp on. And they call it the digital foil stamping, and it still has some room to improve, but it is getting better. And Andy, with you, the equipment guy here, helping Kent with finishing and what they're doing. What types of finishing are you seeing out there, and what market are these books being offered to?
Well, basically, if you listen to back what Larry said yesterday,
He said that better pricing and new technology causes new titles to convert to POD over time. So Muller Martini and many other manufacturers have come up with ways to address the challenge. When you look at digital, whether it's short-run digital, POD, ARP, whatever it might be, the printing part, dare I say to my friendly print partners, is the relatively easy part. It's the finishing of the variability that's a problem. So Muller Martini came up with an ideology called Finishing 4.0. And we've been living with this and working underneath this ideology for years. Automation is a core part of finishing. Now, automation's kind of passé. Automation's something that you think you put a little, it's not putting a motor on a spindle to make a change. It's going to the core of a technology and automating from the ground up that allows you to, if you click the cursor, to allow connectivity. The connectivity is using either XML feeds, those XML tags that was mentioned earlier today, to feed the data down to the finishing. There's a lot of excellent file-to-print workflows out there. Many of our peers that were up here the last day or so, there's many, many solutions for you. But how many file-to-finish product workflows exist? We've worked very diligently on working on the finishing and the workflow to the end. And that's with connectivity. Connectivity has two phases, really. It's the XML, it's the download of data through the print process to the finishing, but also barcodes that are placed strategically on the printed product that drives the finishing, cover matching for personalization. The publishing community wants personalization, wants to have much shorter runs. When you have the process of putting a cover on a book, a case onto a book block, how do you guarantee it's Jim's book or Sue's book? You have to have that connectivity to guarantee that. Good? That's all to do to address the variability. Variability could be in content, the cover match example I just gave, but it can also be in format size. So in order to really attack the format size, we have those barcodes on the printed product, but by using touchless workflow, which is the next pillar of Finishing 4.0, we use connectivity through XML feeds and barcode placed strategically on the printed product to drive the variability that's inherent in the personalization of the content of the product, as well as the format of the product, to drive that automation through touchless workflow. And that's what I call file-to-finish product workflow. It's taking the file from up front and making sure that what's touched in the beginning is used without any touchlessly, through the touchless workflow, to make sure your finishing is done properly. And over the top, the umbrella of the whole thing is the last pillar, hybrid. There was a comment made earlier today by Mike Collins and by Brad, that delivering consistent quality across the platforms is challenging. And I fully agree with that when it comes to the print process and to a certain extent to the finishing. But with this ideology, we've made it such that through our hybrid solutions, many of our perfect binders and saddle stitchers can finish offset and digital on the same machine. So what does that provide you? That provides you the same quality, binding quality, because the same binder is making a digital book or making an offset book. It also means that there's more books per square foot and labor hour, labor being such a challenge. If the same machine can produce both workflows, you don't need a separate device to do digital. That means you don't need to hire the people for that, nor do you have to have more floor space and utilities to drive that device. So hybrid systems go to normalize the consistent quality question. The other part is narrowing the gap. That's what Brad said. The gap is narrowing between what PSPs are providing with digital and offset production. Hybrid can go one step further, though. Through that touchless workflow, you can drive products where the digitally printed product with that barcode strategically placed on the sheet can drive, and out of the pocket, you can pull offset sheets, offset signatures out of the pocket. So imagine you're feeding a book block at the beginning of a gathering line. It goes through, and by reading that barcode, it knows trigger pocket 7, 8, 9 to take some static product on the top of that and then bind it. That's true hybrid production. So from a publishing perspective and a manufacturing perspective, think about that. You have the personalization you desire, but you have less unit cost to that book. Because you might do, let's say, a healthcare book that it's personalized to a point. But then you have, everyone has to get that disclaimer pages, 64 pages of disclaimers. You don't want to print that digitally because it's going to cost a lot more money per page. So through the Finishing 4.0 ideology, Muller and many other manufacturers have come up with ways to use touchless workflow systems to drive the automation through that connectivity I mentioned, to address the variability in a hybrid space. And that's going to continue to narrow the gap of quality, to narrow the concerns around finishing across the platforms and the life cycle of a book. That's what's behind the future of finishing. So don't worry so much about standardization as much anymore in finishing. You can trim a book to anything you want by a barcode. I mean anything. 4x4 to 13x14 and change. Trim it, book to book at speed, no problem. So there's ways to get around some of the challenges, and then that may opens up some of the opportunities for the publishing space.
Thanks, Andy. So Kent, as the lone manufacturer up here of books, I guess, what are you seeing today on the cover side and finishing side? And do you have any examples of maybe real successes that someone chose the right product or finish, or any failures like this is not fit for purpose?
Right. Let me back up. First of all, I'm Kent Larson with Bridgeport National Bindery, and I just want to thank all of you for being here this afternoon. The BMI has been at this for a number of years, wanting to put together publishers of all sizes, manufacturers of all sizes, into a room where we can talk ideas. And that's what this is about. I represent many wonderful organizations in this room that make the book. We are very unique, very small compared to many other people because we make one book at a time. We were a library bindery, and a library bindery takes January through June issues of periodicals and gives them back to Yale and says, here's your book to put on the shelf. That was us years ago. And this market started changing 30 years ago to the degree that things were going digital. And it's all about the ultimate product, which is the physical book. And I am so excited. I don't know if I have the enthusiasm that Rojak has. Maybe we should get together and combust. But bottom line is the book is never going away. It is not. What is changing, and all of us are here for the reason of finding out how do you get from point A of authorship to basically point Z, which is the person who is buying that book. Whether it's file management, whether it's file construction. My piece here today is to talk about the finishing side, specifically with regards to covers. POD has been around for 20 plus years, and the easiest low-hanging fruit has been a paperback, gloss laminated, 60-pound white, boom, get to market. And that's great, and that gets us going, and that gets the highway built. But as this is evolving, I would imagine a number of you in here as publishers are saying, okay, that's great for a certain amount of my titles, but I really want different embellishments. I really want the touch and feel of what I see in the New York Times bestseller list. And there are some things that I want to develop. And that's where standards come in. Are there standards that can be adopted in the manufacturing side, like Andy just mentioned, that will get us a lower price point, quicker, maybe with some different cover material options? And the answer is yeah, that's developing, whether it's laminates, whether it's even some foil embossings. On the paperback side, on the hardcover side, it can be cloth with foil. It can be dust jackets, French flat paperbacks. Someone mentioned doing French flat paperbacks now as POD. I think that was great, P&G. I think that's fantastic that you've done that, because French flat paperbacks, there's more real estate on there. Where we are as a finisher is where a lot of people are as finishers, is we're trying to come up with answers for publishers when they ask for, and I'm going to give the list, 3-piece covers, printed end sheets. These are all for one at a time. 3-piece covers, printed end sheets, maybe colored end sheets, colored headbands, ribbons, die foil stamping, French flat paperbacks, boxes and slipcases, color plate inserts, shrink wrapping, folded over back covers. Can you add a pocket? Can you separate the first half of the book from the back half of the book with a colored sheet? Can you perforate? All on demand, one at a time. As a finisher, that's what we're being asked from by a number of different publishers, and coming up with those solutions is what we're about.
So we've kind of talked about what's out there, what people are seeing, what these three guys have been dealing with. So now, how does that affect planning? You know, how do we get the publishers, how do they plan for it to their printers? And how does the finishing and the cover materials affect the time, the cost, the turnaround, the quantities? On the cover material side, how does picking your cover material affect planning, cost, and quantities? Irene?
Yeah, I mean, I think it really depends on what's the end use application for the book that you're making. Are you making a New York Times bestseller? Are you making a board book for a child? Are you making a law book that's going to need to withstand the test of time? Are you making a religious Bible that's going to need to be passed down from generation to generation? Or are you making a coffee table book? You know, what's the end result of this product? And so from there, you know, you start to look at, okay, based on what it is that I'm trying to do with this book, how it's going to get used, that's where I need to decide which material I start with. How durable does that product need to be? Are there any sort of specifications I need to worry about? Like, for instance, if it's a textbook, you know, is there a specification that I need to follow to make sure I use the right material so that this book can be durable in the classroom? The other consideration is, you know, what's your time frame? Like we talked about earlier with paper, same thing with cover materials. The more standard a selection you make from a trim size and from a material size, the quicker your turnaround time is going to be. Versus if you're making something that's highly customized and special, say for instance a coffee table book where you've got a really notable author that's got a coffee table book coming out, you know, then you've got a little bit more time to, do you want to try and import cloth from Europe? Or do you want to have a custom color cover material made? So I think those are some of the things to consider. And again, I think the big thing is just, is it fit for use?
And as we know in this industry, is there are more titles than ever, but every one of those titles, quantities are going down. So people are printing more and more titles, but it's not the 10,000 runs, it's the 500s, 2,000s, 3,000s. And to get that exact cloth, that exact material that you're looking for, that publisher's demanding, whether it's a coffee table book or a New York bestseller that wants the soft touch. I'm not sure how long the soft touch trend's going to continue, but that just in the last 3 or 4 years, that has really exploded on the publishing side. Andy, so like on the finishing side, I think this is going to the hybrid system a little bit. You know, when it comes to the offset digital short run, what does it take to do all three of those?
You know, it depends on the product mix. If you're soft cover, it's relatively simple. The solutions that I mentioned earlier have the ability to produce a soft cover book quite effectively, or saddle stitch book quite effectively on the same machine, whether it's books of one or books of many or books of few. It's a bit different when you get to the hardcover side. You know, hardcover is a bit more of a process, as we all know, generating the case, generating the book block, looking at end sheet tipping and things like this. So the challenge has always been, how do you get a device that can do with the increasing volume of ultra short run and hardcover, which is certainly a trend that we're seeing today. How do you create the same quality book using the dynamics of variability in the hardcover space? There you would have more standardization. You have to look at more commonality in formats and whatnot, because when we talked about earlier, you can trim anything you want in a soft cover book. That's easy. You put a cover on a book block and you trim it based on a barcode through the touchless workflow we mentioned earlier. That's not the case with case-in books, because the case has to be made separate from it. The case process is a lot more difficult to make different formats. So we look at each segment of the industry, and we've done, us and many manufacturers, done a really good job in tackling soft cover and saddle stitching. Hardcover is the next frontier. You know, looking for ways to make a hardcover book the right way. In digital, a lot of hardcover books were made with false covers. Basically a blank cover put on a book block, tear it off, which is labor intensive, and again, labor is a bad word. We've talked about that earlier. So now we're looking at ways, together with LBS, with combined end sheets, but also together with new end sheet tipping devices that we're making today for the book of one space, to allow you to make a traditional gauze-backed hardcover book block. Things like scanning and printing, taking a device where when you put a book block through an end sheet tipper, that barcode I mentioned, that's the tracking device for the file to finished product workflow. Well, when you chop off and trim it after the binding process, you lose that barcode. No, we developed, and many others developed systems where you read the barcode before you trim, then you rescan it and print it again on the end sheet. So it goes to the casing in process, that same barcode that comes from pre-press, from where it was generated and strategically in the file, even though it gets lopped off by the process, it stays all the way to the end for casing in. What does that mean to the publishing community? That means personalization in hardcover is very easy to maintain, to guarantee that case to book block match, even in a book of one space. So it's generating these technologies to, even the most challenging of workflows in the hardcover space, find ways to allow the market to migrate to where it is, where all the new titles are coming up, millions of titles in the self-publishing space. We have to make sure finishing keeps up with that transition and at a productive rate. These can't be 50 to 100 books an hour machines. They have to be 1,000 plus an hour machines, which is what you're seeing today.
And I would add to that there are definitely solutions that exist for a common products, but many of us can't just jump in with that investment. And a lot of, I would imagine, publishers can't just jump into a software solution and make that investment. They don't have the return on that yet. The juice isn't worth the squeeze. And so what we've got is basically, you've got to have an idea of, we got to find a solution. Someone's got to start walking. And so I think it's incumbent upon us as an industry, whether we're manufacturers or publishers, to be willing to take those risks and just start walking and begin to say, okay, this has been the way it's been for paperbacks, 6x9, you know, Andy's equipment and other equipment manufacturers that are getting us this far down the road, but we're the group of manufacturers, we're the group of publishers that are here right now looking for a solution and looking for what the next step is. Well, the next step is start walking. Try something that might be offline. Try something that might be scalable, that will get you to do something that's different, that will allow a publisher to say, that's exactly what I'm looking for, let's grow from that. And I'm not saying it's going to be easy or even profitable, but at least it begins us going down that road of thinking differently. And that's why an organization like the BMI exists, so that we can collaborate and talk to each other.
Just one last comment on that. I mean, this is not a new paradigm. This has been happening now for quite a bit of time. So please talk with all of your manufacturing partners, your print service providers, everyone with regards to best practices that exist out there. From a manufacturing perspective, whether it's nearline, offline, inline, whether it's how far personalization can be done with the solutions that exist in the market. There's a lot of best practices that exist. There's no more opinions anymore. We've done the walk quite a bit already. And there's a lot of solutions that you may not know about. So talk to your peers about it, and you'll understand how far along it's really come to address where we're going in the future.
And some of this is the cutting edge, but what do you see, 1, 2, 10 years from now? Ken, as a true POD and, defining that market one at a time, everyone knows you can't touch that book. You have to have the software in place. What do you see the future on the POD as far as the trends?
Well, the conversation, that's why I asked the question earlier about if the growth is happening and there's more titles going into publication than ever before, but yet we're taking paper mills offline, that tells me that there's going to be more specific delivery of that content. There are going to be people who are going to be very specialized in what they want, and there's going to be more and more less large quantities produced from the very beginning. And so that means more titles, fewer runs, but has to be more specialized to make it look special. It has to look and feel like what someone has always wanted it to look like. And that's where the rubber is hitting the road right now, is coming up with those solutions. Where is it going to go in 5 or 10 years? Look at what's gone on in the streaming industry and what studios were. I mean, publishers in some ways are like Fox and CBS and ABC and NBC were 10, 15 years ago, where people are going to YouTube and going direct to Netflix, and they're bypassing traditional channels. What's happening now is there are software companies that are eating publishers' lunch because publishers are stuck, I don't mean to offend, but they're stuck in a model that it's just not going to be sustainable. And so they've got to be innovative and embrace everything we've talked about from the very beginning, all the way from file development to the processing of orders, to time to delivery, all of that. And as a book manufacturer, it's all about making sure that what we make with materials, cover materials, papers, bind styles, number one, is profitable for us, but number two is what the consumer wants. And that consumer can come from wherever they are. We're just, in Massachusetts, but it could be shipping globally, or we can partner with people to get it to the source real quick.
On the sustainability issue, we hear that the runs are going down and they're trying to get rid of the return. Besides throwing away less books, I guess, how can the cover material and finishing help maybe the sustainable part of the book?
Yeah, so definitely in cover materials, we're seeing an uptick in requests for recycled content within the book cover. So that's definitely one of those areas where we're seeing an uptick in demand. As far as FSC certification, there's a large number of book cover materials that are already FSC certified and available on the market as it is. In addition to seeing the increased demand for recycled content within the actual book cover, there's also a visual trend towards more natural looking materials. So what does that look like? It's been, we've seen the mattes come on lines, more of the earth tones, things of that nature.
From a finishing perspective, it's by having a book that can look and feel like an offset in digital, publishers can now truly take advantage of the life cycle management of the book, automatic replenishment programs, ordering only what you need when you need it, taking your 3-year cycles down to 3 weeks of order time. This allows you to exponentially reduce your obsolescence waste. And right there, that's the sustainability, by not wasting so much in the process with the old models. And some people were hesitant, some publishers were hesitant to cross over because of that quality quotient. Yeah. But in the finishing side, that's normalized considerably now and will continue in the next 5 years. The next steps I see there are logistics, to get more efficiency out of those solutions, having logistics to make sure you get the book blocks into the machines more effectively. Because, again, labor is not going to go away. That problem is going to persist perpetually. I don't see that ever going away. So from a manufacturing side, you look at the logistics. But from a publisher's side, order what you need when you need it. That's the key way to keep sustainability and not waste and have to repulp and do everything downstream. It was the core of how inkjet took off back in 2008. And now it's just as important now than it has ever been.
And Andy, you talked a lot about quality there. And I think that's one of the things that we're seeing with the book, especially millennial buyers, right, is that the book itself, the physical object of the book, it's not so much about being mass produced. It's more of that appreciation of the book as a piece of art and having it go more of the way of the cigar went as far as an industry, right? It used to be everyone smoked cigars, and now it's this special item that people kind of, they treasure, right?
Absolutely.
Well, as Irene, she's my poster child for the millennials. So when I started trying to get in the millennials' heads, I always talk to her. And then you start looking at a lot of these direct mail pieces that you're hearing with millennials and Gen Z, that if anyone has a kid that's starting to apply to college, these pieces you're getting in the mail are spectacular. They're embossed, they're debossed. Some of them have a texture to them. Some of them have, UV. And so what a lot of the direct mail guys are putting a lot of money into research, and the tactile and the visual of the printed product to these younger generations is even more important than ever. Before we start, I just kind of, with the publishers in the group, would you any questions or trends that you would like to see, or how do you take the 100,000 runs and make that book just like, the 5 runs? Any publishers have questions for the panel?
Of course. Happens in the back after I get to the front.
He waited till he got front.
Is there any progress towards increasing the recyclability of pulping of books, namely the plastic lamination on covers?
So I'm not certain, I'm not certain about the plastic lamination, but I have seen some very promising work on the repulpability of cover materials. I can't go into too much detail, but yes, that's definitely something that's being looked at. It's especially tangential to the packaging space where that's certainly more important. And a lot of the packaging, like the higher end luxury packaging materials, are also used in some of the higher end book cover materials.
As the lamination can be problematic, but what they're seeing in some of these coated products that are almost as durable as a lamination during what?
I would say they're more durable.
Yeah, during the pulping process, those can actually be separated to some degree, and it's getting to where the definition is almost where we can say it's recyclable. It all has to do with the ratio of what's left in the bottom of what's it's pulped and not pulped, and if you have enough of that book percentage that is recyclable, there's some of these products that are coated that are gonna, in the future, fairly near future, they're gonna be considered recyclable. So the lamination side, there is not really a biodegradable lamination right now, but there are some coated cover materials that have never been considered recyclable that are getting really close when you take that book, recycle it, and the percentage. Any other questions in general from manufacturers or anyone?
We're from Lulu Press, and we might be the odd duck out here because we're actually self-publishing software platform. So we're not in the publishing business directly ourselves, but we're dealing directly with self-publishers and authors. And the one comment I would make is that I think what I'm seeing on these panels is absolutely where it has been headed. I would even say it's pretty far off in that direction. Customers are not just going to be, publishing clients and whatnot. They're going to be the authors themselves. They're going to be the creators. They actually care more about these one-off books than maybe can legitimately be produced. And so the comment I want to make is they're going to want all of the things that you can get in a traditionally manufactured book. We already see that today. Every year, for better or for worse, I push Kent to offer us more solutions. So whether it's flaps or embossing or printing foil. And so the bar is really going up. And what I would say from my experience is automation is essential, and it goes right down to the software. Our businesses, we take a file. You cannot expect that file to be clean. We don't have source files. We're giving over a PDF. So you've got to get good at cleaning up the file with normalization after the fact. You have to get good at being variable. We're product one. We make one-off books. And so I think this is just the pace of this is going to skyrocket. And so, what would I like to see? Let's say from Muller, Martini, or others, we need barcodes. We need barcodes everywhere. The more of them we can get, the better. But we also need to not see them. We can't have the constraints of, well, it's a mechanical bind. There's nowhere to put the barcode on that particular one, so there's nothing we can do about it. Whatever you can think of technologically to reduce that, whether it's the labor or the defect rate or just the consistency across machines, facilities, geographies, use the technology and push that edge as hard as you can, because that's going to define where the market goes. I mean, I see it today. So if I could have hey, I'd like to see this happen, I would like to see barcodes that are invisible. We know it exists. The technology's been around for 5 or 6 years, but I've yet to see that offered fully automated. And that's critical, because once you are not touching or looking at the content or the book, you are really at risk, because that author is going to open that book and they're going to scour through it. So I think today people are pretty flexible because we're transitioning. They're just going to get more demanding. I can attest to that.
And to second that, I would simply say that there is no way that one company has a solution. And that's the importance of this organization. I've got a life. I work and I love what I do, but I have a life outside of making books. I don't make books 24 hours a day. So I rely on other people in this industry to help me know better what I can offer emerging markets. And so the beauty of the BMI is it has always been a collaborative organization that allows us to talk with each other, because it's the pie is getting wider. And the slivers that we're going to own within that pie are niche. And so the more niche-y we can get, the better. I almost said something, but I'm not going to say that. Hold my tongue. So in any case, I think that this is the beginning. This kind of an event like this is hopefully the beginning of more dialogue that we can have in understanding how to do things for each other and with each other that will better ultimately the number one thing, which is someone outside of this room is just buying a book right now. They're getting a book delivered to them. That's what we're here for. And that's what we want to try to make sure we continue to offer.
To your point regarding the barcodes, some of that's happening already. A couple of examples, not the stealth dots yet. We're looking at that, but with the opaque, the invisible ink type thing. But we have gone to more of a better-looking 2D barcode that some people are okay having in the book, which is better than a 1D. That's one of the transitions. Also, putting the barcode and spitting it on the spine, the gauze of the book, which completely disappears as opposed to possibly bleeding through the end sheet, for example. So we've found ways already with a 2D barcode to hide it as much as possible. Not possible with a wire O where there's no trim in the end, but we are looking at ways to either eliminate it completely or at least if it stays in there, it's a better looking piece. But we're not done. We're going to continue to work on that, knowing that that connectivity for that touchless workflow, the barcode's critical.
I still want a deckled edge for a one-on-demand book.
Just no glitter, remember, no glitter.
And glitter.
Any other questions? All right. Thank you very much.
Thank you.